talking about the benefits of seed oil, I got quite a lot of hate mail. One of them said, how does it feel to be the most hated scientist in America right now?
In my oat milk, why do I need to have rapeseed oil in there?
But the damaging stuff is, I think, the misinformation and making people focus on the wrong things. Oh my gosh, eating sticks of butter because you think it's healthy for you. The evidence does not support that.
Grass-fed butter.
I don't care. It can be corn-fed, grass-fed, etc. Just because something's natural doesn't mean it's better for you.
Beef tallow.
Oh, big pass on that.
We've all heard the rules. Cow's milk is the worst thing for you. Carbs are the devil, and seed oils will kill you. But what if most of what we've been told about healthy eating is wrong? In today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Sarah Berry, one of the world's leading experts on how our bodies uniquely respond to food. She spent over 20 years researching nutrition science, personalised metabolism, and how people react to what they eat. Together, we're going to bust some of the biggest myths around food, explore why nutrition isn't a one-size-fits-all, and unpack how small shifts, like when you eat, can make a huge difference to your health. So if you felt confused by conflicting food advice or wondered what the best thing to do to build muscle or lose weight, this episode will hopefully change the way you think about eating for good. And if this episode does change the way that you think, whether it's given you clarity or better advice or really helped you with your diet or even the stress that we get from hearing all of these crazy headlines, I'd be so grateful if you could share it with a friend or press that like, follow, and subscribe button. Your support helps me keep going with the show, but it also allows me to invite some of the best experts on the show so that we can learn and grow with them. Thank you so much to everyone who watched this podcast. Let's get to this episode. Dr. Berry, welcome to Millennial Mind.
Well, thank you for having me, and call me Sarah.
Yes. I love calling you Dr. Berry because I feel that it's so good to have a doctor here today because you're going to change my mind on some of these healthy eating myths that we're seeing all over social media. And quite frankly, I'm quite sick of them. And I don't really know what's true and what's false, what's good for me, what's bad for me, what's going to kill me, what's going to give me cancer, what's going to make me lose weight, what's going to make my hair fall out. It is so confusing. And we're seeing so many health myths out there that it's actually leading to a lot of stress, anxiety, and worry in a lot of people. What are some of the common health myths that you've seen at the moment in your research and also from, your studies?
Gosh, there's so many health myths out there. And I mean, it amazes me what I see on social media and what I see in, the press, for example. And each day there's a different headline that I just am like, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
And it's just nonsense, most of it. Most of it, I have no idea sometimes what they're even talking about, honestly. Like, I'm sure there's going to be some things you're going to ask me and I'm going to probably be like, never even heard of that. So there's some myths that have been going around for a while. So some of these myths are things like seed oils are toxic, oats are going to kill us because they're going to spike our glucose. There's new myths that are coming out, like raw milk is the cure-all. Then there's other kind of myths that, again, have been bubbling away for a long time, I think, about kind of keto diets. And then there's what I'd call kind of fads rather than just myths. So fads like, add apple cider vinegar to what you're eating. And, we can touch on that later.
I really want to talk about that. Someone sent me an apple cider vinegar. I was just about to buy it. So yeah, great timing.
So there's fads that I think there's very little evidence for.
Okay.
And I think that what worries me with some of these fads is that they can be really burdensome in terms of taking away the pleasure of food, taking away the pleasure of an eating event. When we eat food, it's to enjoy the food, but it's also part of our culture, it's part of our social interactions.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think these fads are problematic from that point of view, problematic because they can be expensive, and they just remove that joy. But then there's the misinformation out there. There's the miscommunication, around different research studies. But the damaging stuff is, I think, the misinformation that's actually can be damaging people's health and making people focus on the wrong things and detracting from what we really should be focusing on. in the UK, in the US, in most countries, the biggest problem is we don't have enough fiber. We don't have enough diversity of unprocessed plant-based foods. We're eating too much heavily processed foods, too much sugar, too much salt, etc.
Yeah.
We need to focus on the basics. Then we can start worrying about kind of trimming around the edges.
It's so interesting because I really want to actually start with seed oils. And I want to just say something really quickly on fiber just to show off about myself, because I really struggled with bloating 2 weeks ago, and I want to come on to bloating.
Yep.
One thing that I started to do was keep a food diary. And the only way I did that was through MyFitnessPal. Now, in MyFitnessPal, I realized I was eating 50 grams of fiber a day, which is quite a lot, isn't it?
That's impressive. Well done.
I know. I just wanted to show off to you to get in your good books. But also, I know that could lead to bloating. So I do want to kind of talk about that in a little while. I want to start with seed oils. I see all the time rapeseed oil is bad for you. Sunflower oil is bad for you. And I'm sure there's other seed oils I don't even know of, right? I personally have believed these headlines. And I also do agree to some extent that in my oat milk, why do I need to have rapeseed oil in there? In my food, why does there need to be rapeseed oil in there? You know, rapeseed oil, I understand you're going to tell me all the reasons why it's good for you, but why do we need to add it to certain things? Because it makes it ultra processed, does it not?
So, firstly, I think seed oils are a fantastic part of a healthy diet.
Really?
And I would love to explain to you why there's these terrible myths out there and why I think it's part of a healthy diet. But to address the first point about why are we adding it in and does it therefore mean it's an ultra-processed food, I think the whole term about whether a food is ultra-processed or not is really, really confusing.
Okay.
I think we need to be thinking about food in terms of, has it been processed in such a way that it makes it unhealthy? So has it been processed in such a way that it's got lots of additives, emulsifiers, colorants that may be of harm to us? There's many that are of no harm. There's many additives that are actually beneficial for us. So has it got additives in that are harmful for us? And secondly, has the structure of the food been changed such that it might cause us to overeat the food? And has the composition of the food, the nutrients, again been changed so that we overconsume?
Okay.
So often when food is processed, the structure is broken down. And what that means is often the food is absorbed a lot more quickly. It means that we tend to overconsume, so we consume excessive calories. It changes how it's metabolized, where it's metabolized, our feelings of hunger, etc. And so that's where processing can be a problem.
Right.
And so it's not so much because, it's maybe has this little bit of sugar in there or this bit of salt. Yes, overall, heavily processed foods tends to have more salt, more sugar, tends to have less fiber. But we need to be thinking about it, I think, a little bit differently to how we've been thinking before. And we've done research at King's, at the university that I conduct my studies at, where we've been looking at how just changing the structure of a food through processing can change how it impacts your health. So if you take large porridge, for example, and then you grind it, so it's finer porridge, and one day I was to give you the large porridge to eat, and then the next day I was to give you exactly the same, but I've just made it, ground it down, and was to give you that to eat. If it's ground down into smaller particles, you absorb it a lot more quickly. You have a bigger blood sugar peak. You have a dip in blood sugar as well, typically. This is on average, about 2 to 4 hours after. It's absorbed in a different part of your gastrointestinal tract where there's less fullness receptors. So your brain says, whoa, hold on, I'm having this dip in glucose, I'm not feeling full, you need to eat more. And so it means that you're having a worse metabolic response and you're more hungry and you go on to eat more calories. And yet, essentially what I've given you one day versus the other day is exactly the same back-of-pack labelling. All that's changed is that we've ground this down. Wow. And this is where processing can also negatively impact our health. It's a double-edged sword. In some cases, it's beneficial for us. And so it's those kind of aspects related to processing and the harm or lack of harm of the additives that go into it we need to focus on, rather than, oh my gosh, this has got seed oils in, which I think is a healthy component of the diet anyway. I think that it is important to acknowledge that about 60% of the seed oils, rapeseed oil, sunflower seed oil, for example, is found in these heavily processed unhealthy foods.
Yeah.
So a lot of the seed oils that we are eating is found in foods that tend to be high in sugar or high in saturated fat or high in salt, and where the food structure is destroyed. So a lot of it is found in these unhealthy foods, but it's not the seed oils that are making the food unhealthy. The seed oils themselves are really healthy fats, in my opinion.
So why are people saying that they're so bad for you? So if we think about, for example, let's just take Oatly. Okay.
Yep.
So Oatly is a product which I love. I absolutely love it. But I do think it is terrible for my body. And I'll explain why. If I want to have a matcha once a day, twice a day, or a nice coffee, in a glass of oat milk that's about this much, there's this much oil in it. And I don't feel like when I'm having oat milk, I should need that oil. I think I just need to have the oats and the milk. And so now I actually use Plenish, which is just oats, milk, and sea salt, which I think is so much better. But because there's products like that that taste amazing, that froth the milk so nicely, and because, we think that it's completely normal to have 1 or 2 coffees a day, if you're having that much Oatly and having that much rapeseed oil just in your drinks, and then you're adding all these rapeseed oils in your food, surely an excessive amount is bad for you.
So I think firstly, why is it in there? I don't know why Oatly have put it in there, but generally fat is added to food for a number of reasons. The most important is it gives a functionality to the food. So try baking a cake where you've got no fat in it. You're not going to have a cake that rises in the same way, that has the same texture. But most importantly, fat actually carries flavour. So fat has what we call organoleptic properties. So these properties that when it's in your mouth, it releases the flavour, but also it gives a lovely kind of creamy mouthfeel to food. So it's added to food generally to give that functionality as to the food, but also in order for us to enjoy the food.
Right.
Why it's added to Oatly, I'm not quite sure, but I imagine it's in order to maintain some sort of structural integrity of the milk. I think that if we talk about Oatly quickly before we go on to talk about kind of the seed oils and myth busting, why there's this awful nonsense out there about seed oils.
Sorry, I feel like I've made you like the president of Oatly to be like, why is this in here? Why are we having that?
So I think we've got to think, okay, firstly, in the bigger picture, plant milks. Why are we consuming plant milks? Are we having plant milks because of concerns about animal welfare? Are we having them concerns about planetary health?
Yeah.
And if you're having them because of those concerns, absolutely, that's the right choice for you.
Okay.
There's lots of different types you can have, the heavily processed ones like Oatly or the less processed ones like you've said yourself. If people are choosing to have these plant-based milks because they think that they have this health halo, and I think Oatly are very clever, and some of these plant-based milks are really clever at giving this kind of health halo that, oh, it's natural, oh, it's plant-based. That's where I think there is a little bit of mismarketing, because I think aside from the animal and planetary welfare side of you, I think unless it is the very unprocessed versions, in my opinion, there's no benefit from having these plant-based milks over dairy milk at the typical levels that we consume them. Now, there are studies that have showed having oat milk versus cow's milk, if you're having quite a large amount each day, and we're talking litres nearly, if you are having like a litre each day, yes, for oat milk, it has a particular fibre in it called beta-glucan. If you're having a certain amount, so 3 grams a day of beta-glucan, this very special soluble fibre, it lowers your cholesterol. So if you're having a lot of oat milk, yes, it's advantageous if you have high cholesterol to swap from dairy milk to oat milk because it may lower your cholesterol. But we're talking at quite large amounts. If you're having it in the typical amount that you're probably having it, maybe having 2 or 3 coffees a day, I personally think between semi-skimmed skim milk versus the plant-based milk, you're talking almost no difference in health outcomes based on the research that's out there. However, if you're having the unprocessed homemade plant milks, so the almond milks, the oat milks that you can make at home, then yes, there may be some advantage because you are getting some of the planting, but generally about 98% of these are just water. Generally, you look at the almond milks, you look at the oat milk, and actually it's a really small amount of rapeseed oil that's put in. It's a really small amount of sugar that's in it. It's generally just water, and expensive water that you're having as well.
Wow.
So I would save the pennies personally.
That's really interesting because when I've talked about oat milk, soya milk, semi-skimmed milk, it's really confusing because everyone says have everything within moderation. right? Now, if I'm having 2 matcha lattes a day, that's not moderation. It's about half a litre of milk I'm having if I have 2. If I have 3, I would say it's 3/4 because in a cup is probably about 330 ml.
Yep.
Majority of that is milk. 250 minimum is milk. So if I were to choose one milk for me to have, if I'm having 2 to 3 matchas or 2 to 3 milky coffees like a latte or a cappuccino a day, what's your best recommendation for health?
Gosh, now you're putting me on the spot. So let's say you are having about 750 mils, okay, which is quite a lot, but we'll go with that.
Yeah. I was though. I mean,
Okay.
if you have a milky coffee, you can kind of get away with it.
I
If you have
don't
an
drink
American-
coffee, so I'm a tea drinker, so I have about this much milk in the day.
But also, with Indian tea, you boil it with a lot of milk.
Yeah.
So you're having definitely like 500 mils. My mum makes it on the weekend. I have 2 cups, half a litre for sure.
Okay, so I'm giving you kind of my best guess on the research that's out there. I haven't done clinical trials on this myself. So my best guess on the basis of the research that's out there, if you're having skimmed milk, so you've got very little of the fat in there, so very little of the saturated fat that we know isn't great for us, I think that's perfectly fine at 750 mils a day.
Okay.
And I would say that's comparable to having the oat milks, the almond milks, the soya milks.
Okay.
I think that if I was to be forced into a decision, which I think you're forcing me into, not that I'm feeling under any pressure.
A gun to your head. Answer me.
Well, it's that guy behind that's pulling the gun. I think that if you were to say whole milk and semi-skimmed milk versus the plant-based, assuming they are not these heavily processed that have added ingredients that I don't think need to be there, whether it's even a healthy oil or not, but having lots of things added to it, additives, some of them have emulsifiers, so if it's the very natural plant-based, oats, soya, almond, then whilst I think that actually it's mainly just water, there will be some benefits from having some of the plant products in there. So whether it's from the almonds, I'm assuming there'll be some vitamin E in there because almonds are very high in vitamin E. There'll be some of the healthy fats if it's still retained from the almonds, etc. So I think at that level of intake, with that gun to my head, I would say go for the plant-based, unprocessed as much as possible versions with as least additives in there.
Like Plenish,
Yeah, or the skimmed milk over the semi-skimmed and whole milk. But I do think having semi-skimmed milk, even at 750 mils, I think it's about thinking of, the bigger picture of your diet. It's the boring message. It is about balance. It is about thinking of the bigger picture.
I think people are confused. So why would you say skimmed over semi-skimmed? Is it just the fat content?
Just the fat content.
Okay,
so
because it would be too high if you're having 750 mils a day.
Yeah, so in terms of the types of fat. So we now know from research that the amount of fat you're having isn't necessarily that important within reason.
Okay.
And I'm sorry to caveat with the balance and within reason. So, as long as you're not having excessive amounts of fats, we know that actually fat can be a really important way of improving your health, which is why I really advocate for seed oils, and we will come back to this.
We will come back to seed oils, yeah.
So what we know, though, is the type of fat that matters.
Okay.
And so what we know is that fat has fantastic properties in terms of, like I said, making the food taste great. It also is really important in terms of keeping us full, of modulating, how quickly our stomach empties. It has really important roles in our bodily functions. Some fats are even essential to us and we need them for normal cell growth, repair, etc. Vision, so many other factors. But what we now know is the type of fat that really matters. We know that saturated fat generally is bad for us, and mono and polyunsaturated fats generally are good for us. Mono and polyunsaturated fats tend to be liquid at room temperature. So if your fat is liquid or oil, that will tend to be rich in mono and polyunsaturated fats, which are really good for us. They lower cholesterol. They're great for us. Most saturated fats tend to be bad for us. We now know, though, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So generally, the public health message has been reduce your saturated fat intake. It's going to increase your cholesterol. We now know that the food that the saturated fat is in is really important in modulating how that impacts us. And this is why dairy is such an interesting food group. Right. So if you have saturated fat in what we call unfermented dairy, so that's milk, butter, for example, we know that saturated fat in milk and in butter can increase our cholesterol levels.
Okay.
So that's why I would say try and go for semi-skimmed or skimmed. I mean, semi-skimmed has very little fat in it, unless you're having
750 mils, like me.
So I do think that whilst I think milk is a fantastic part of our diet, it's packed full of so many different micronutrients, calcium and so many other different micronutrients, I do think that it's quite sensible to swap from whole milk to skimmed or semi-skimmed, because you still get the same amount of nearly all of those nutrients, protein, etc., even in the skimmed or semi-skimmed.
Okay.
I think it's sensible to switch from butter if you're having that in excessive amounts. But where it gets interesting with dairy is if the dairy is fermented, and so by that I mean cheese and yogurt. So cheese and yogurt is a fermented dairy.
Okay.
Now, don't ask me the complexities of fermentation, please. I could see your brain cells ticking. I can't answer that. So if it's fermented, the matrix, so that structure of the dairy, changes such that the saturated fat in yogurt and cheese does not seem to impact us negatively in the same way as butter or milk.
Really?
Yeah, and this is why this whole area of what I call food matrix, I've spent many years studying, or that food structure. So, for example, how I talked about the porridge, the structure of food is so important in modulating how a food impacts our health. So you could have butter that essentially has a very similar fat profile to cheese, not identical, but really similar. Both have high amounts of saturated fat. The butter will increase your cholesterol levels once you're having above, a small amount. The cheese, again, I'm not talking about excessive amounts, but the cheese does not have the same negative impact on our cholesterol. We don't fully understand why. We believe it's partly due to the matrix of the dairy when it's fermented. It's something that researchers are looking into to understand why. But this is why I really advocate as a nutrition scientist for us taking a food-first approach and not just looking at nutrients. And so that's why I wanted to give you the example, for example, of the large porridge versus the fine, because they would have the same back-of-pack labelling in terms of nutrients, fat, protein, fibre, carbohydrate. But how our body handles them is totally different. Butter and cheese, broadly similar, saturated fat, etc., broadly similar, but actually how they impact our health, very, very different. And so we need to stop over-focusing on labels. Like, obviously, they do give us a bit of a hint. If it's got 50 grams of sugar in, don't go there.
Obviously.
But I think we need to be taking that food-first approach when we're thinking about how our food impacts our health.
This is so interesting. We're going to come back to rapeseed oil. We're going to come back to...
I'm not leaving here till we talked about seed oils.
We are going to come back to the milk saga because I want to talk about bloating and being lactose intolerant.
Yep.
But you've just said something really interesting to me, which also comes on to another myth I want to bust, which is about how carbs are bad for you. Now, you've just said that butter, broken down, can actually have higher sat fat than cheese, correct?
So butter and cheese have almost the same amount of saturated fat, but how it impacts your cholesterol levels in your blood is different. So butter can increase your bad cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol, yet cheese seems to have a more neutral effect on your bad cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol, even though they have the same nutrients.
And what about calorie-wise? Which would make me put on weight more? Or is that only linked to cholesterol?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer for that.
Okay.
I would, if I was, again, had that gun to the back of my head, I
love this. I love that I've made you feel that you need to answer the questions as if there's a gun behind the curtain. That says a lot about me, doesn't it?
It is, because as scientists, we sit on the fence on so many things. We always say, our favourite thing is we need to do more studies on this.
Right. And people don't want to hear that.
And I know that a listener doesn't want to hear me saying, I don't know, we need to do more studies. So I'm giving a cautious guess. We know that cheese has a reasonable amount of protein. It has more protein than butter. I don't know off the top of my head how much more. We know that protein is particularly good at making you feel fuller for longer, at modulating your absorption of glucose, et cetera, And so potentially cheese may therefore be per calorie better at maintaining weight than butter. but I'm just making a total guess. But what you've got to think is they've got different functions. You're not going to spread cheese. Well, maybe if you bought Philadelphia, but most people aren't going to spread. You can't spread a block of cheddar. And yet, so they're used in different ways. So I think when we need to think about, is one food better for us in terms of weight maintenance than another, we need to think of what we call functional equivalents.
Yes.
So we need to think of, okay, what about butter versus a low-fat spread, or this cheese versus another kind of filling that you might put in your sandwich?
The reason I asked that question is because everybody is obsessed right now with the keto diet. So they put butter in a pan, they have a steak for breakfast. I just saw this Piers Morgan clip where he asked this girl, what do you eat for breakfast? She said a sirloin steak. What do you eat for lunch? Sirloin steak. What do you eat for dinner? Sirloin steak with butter. And so
what did he say to her?
He was like, oh, that's crazy. You look really healthy. I mean, how are you alive? And all the comments were about cholesterol and how is she alive? And, how is she not eating anything else? And she's lying. And, it was a mix of things. But what I am seeing online is people saying, eat loads of butter. What I have seen from so many people is skip the cheese, skip the carbs. I don't know if you saw this viral TikTok video, but it was a woman who was at a dinner. I don't know which country it was in, so I'm not going to say, but she was at this fancy restaurant, and the waiter came to give her a pizza. And she said, does it look like I eat carbs? Now, carbs have been the villain for a very, very, very long time. And I think cheese has also been a villain. We don't want to add too much cheese in because it's fatty. But butter now is, the new celery stick, in my opinion. Well, not in my opinion, sorry, from what I've seen. So I guess my question is are carbs really that bad for you? And should we be eating more sticks of butter as we're seeing people have?
No. It's a simple answer.
Why?
It just shocks me. Listening to you, and I was just thinking about, over the last 25 years, I've been teaching nutrition at King's College London. I've been teaching medical students, dietetic students, nutrition students. And it's really interesting because I'm realizing, every 5 years, I'm introducing a new villain. I used to start my lectures on fats saying, fats are the baddie of the food world. Then that changed to carbohydrates. Then it changed sugar. And, it's crazy how it's evolved. But I think we're at a point in time where now everything is demonized.
Yes.
So you're saying this is demonized, that's demonized. Someone doesn't want this on their pizza. It's like, my gosh, how does anyone know how to eat healthy? Okay, so butter, no, absolutely not. It's packed with saturated fat. There's so much evidence to show butter increases your circulating bad cholesterol. Bad cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, increases your risk of heart disease, increases your risk of furring of the arteries and lots of other problems related to vascular dysfunction. So, poor blood vessel function, whether that's vascular dementia, whether it's stroke, whether it's heart attack, etc. In small amounts, butter's fine. I like butter on my toast. I don't want to spread some watery low-fat spread on my toast. It doesn't taste nice. In small amounts, it's absolutely fine. But oh my gosh, eating sticks of butter because you think it's healthy for you, the evidence does not support that.
Grass-fed butter.
The evidence does not support that. I don't care. It can be corn-fed, grass-fed, etc. It's still got saturated fat in. Yes, you can change what the cows are fed on to slightly modulate the composition, but it's still not good for you if it's consumed in excess, i.e. sticks of that.
But what if you have that instead of a piece of chocolate? What if I had dates with butter instead of dates with peanut butter drizzled with some dark chocolate? Which is better for me?
Dates with peanut butter and dark chocolate?
No.
So you've got dates, they're good for you. Yes, they're quite high in sugar, but it's fine. They've got loads of fibre, etc. Then you've got butter, so you've just basically got something that is just fat that's going to raise your cholesterol. Or you've got dates with peanut butter. Peanut butter is packed with protein, with fibre, packed with heart-healthy oils. So these mono and polyunsaturated fats, so good for you.
But also has loads of fat content, no?
Yes, but it's good fat.
But what's the difference between good fat from peanut butter and bad fat from just butter?
So the peanut butter, the butter is basically coming from the fat in the peanuts. So you're grinding down the peanuts, and so you're getting the butter, so to say, or rather the oil from the peanuts. So you are getting some saturated fat, but you're getting a large amount of mono and polyunsaturated fat. So it's not that the peanuts are added to the dairy fat.
Correct.
So it's two different sources.
Yes.
So
the words are confusing, aren't they?
Basically, but it's called a butter because it's spreadable.
Yeah.
But basically it's a healthy, let's consider it as a healthy peanut oil spread. And then you've got dark chocolate. Dark chocolate, we know, depending on the amount of cocoa solids that are in it, can actually be really healthy for us. Cocoa solids have these chemicals in them, these bioactives that are called polyphenols. And polyphenols have really potent effects in our body in terms of acting on inflammatory pathways, oxidative pathways, in reducing, therefore, oxidative stress, inflammation, in dilating our blood vessels. And so we know that polyphenols are associated with improved blood vessel function, improved heart health, improved cognition, etc., and have multiple benefits. So if you're having the right type of chocolate, and I'm sorry again, it's always more nuanced.
Yeah.
No, but I do love a Snickers bar. But if you're having the right type of chocolate, so dark chocolate that's got lots of cocoa solids, that doesn't have a lot of added sugar in, it should have minimal added sugar, that's really can be healthy for you. Again, it's all in moderation. I'm not suggesting that you just go and eat all your food from that. So I would say that the dates, the peanut butter and the dark chocolate could actually be a really healthy snack. You're getting fibre, you're getting protein, you're getting healthy oils, you're getting polyphenols. Great.
The argument against this again is that if we think back to when we were, I don't even know what the term is that people use now, but let's just say, let me start again. The argument I would say against this, one more, is 100 years ago, 200 years ago, let's just say 100 years ago, let's not go back too extreme. 100 years ago, we would be able to have butter. It was natural. It's a natural source. Peanut butter, perhaps not so much, right? With the ones that people are using, Sunpat and all these other different brands. I don't use any of those, by the way, another tick for me. But, if we think about butter, it is a natural source. So a lot of people are having butters, dates, fruits. They're not having any of these seed oils or any of these other bread, carbs, all these other pastas, pizza, because they're saying these are all man-made. If we go back to our ancestors and we eat the ancestral diet and we eat natural things, surely that's the best thing for us, because we're now in supermarkets where we're constantly told to eat all of these different refined sugars and processed foods. So butter is surely a healthier food because it's natural.
So I think this is a really big misconception out there. Just because something's natural doesn't mean it's better for you. So
really,
take lard. I'm going to ask you a question if you don't mind now.
Of course.
Do you think eating a bowl of lard is going to be good for your health?
Okay, stupid question. What is lard?
So lard is basically the fat from a pig.
Okay, I'm vegetarian, so no, I will not eat lard.
So like butter is the fat from a cow.
Okay.
So it's similar.
Okay, so it's the fat from a pig. Okay, no, obviously.
So imagine just eating strips of bacon fat. Do you think that's going to be good for you?
No.
But it's natural, according to people that use that claim.
Interesting.
Okay. What about having a whole grain slice of bread? That's unnatural because that's processed.
Right.
But surely that's better for you. Sorry, this isn't a trick question.
Yeah,
I'm
glad you're challenging me, because I do think it's important to have this nuanced discussion. When I'm seeing people eating all these natural foods, it makes sense to me though. In my head, I think if it's not processed, if you're not putting it through all these different, processes and all these artificial ingredients and sweeteners and emulsifiers and additives, maybe the bacon is better for you. This is why we're seeing people eating only a carnivorous diet. We're seeing people only have keto, and it's working for them to lose weight and to be healthy and to look younger.
So I think there's lots of things to pick up on here. I think firstly, just because it's natural doesn't mean it's better. I think that absolutely there are lots of foods that are heavily processed, that the food structure's broken down, that there's loads of additive stuff we shouldn't be eating. There's lots of food that's processed in a way that actually makes it healthy for us. Can make it healthy for us. There's lots of foods that the processing has a neutral effect, but just means that it's more shelf stable, we're able to eat it. And so I think we need to move away from thinking, okay, is it really heavily processed or is it unprocessed? And that determines the healthfulness of a food. So I think it's a bit more complicated. If we think to 100 years ago, our food landscape was entirely different.
Yeah.
The way we live our lives was entirely different. 100 years ago, there was very few two working parent households.
True.
Most of the time, and I don't know the percentage, but the majority of households had the wife, the mum at home, spending their day doing the house chores, preparing meals, preparing home-cooked meals from many unprocessed ingredients. And so as part of an overall healthy diet, yes, butter then can have a role because you're not having all of these other ultra-processed foods coming in. The problem is our food landscape and how we live our lives has changed beyond recognition. The majority of people are sedentary now. The majority of households are two working parents. And that's a real problem, I think, for what's being fed at home. I'm guilty of this. I juggle 2 jobs. I've got 2 kids. They get a lot of processed food that I know that they shouldn't be having. But do I make it enough of a priority? No, and I know I should be, but time is an issue. And so against the backdrop of all of this other crap that's out there, then also having the butter, which we know isn't good for our health, on top of that, that's where it becomes a problem. And so I think we can romanticize and look back 100, 200, 500 years ago to hunter-gatherer ages, or, where, yes, we were living on a few berries and killing that pig or that cow. But that was a very different way that we were living our lives. We're not living our lives that way, and we're not exposed to the food environment and the fast way in which we can, and accessibility of food that we have now. And so I think the argument that's used against, but it's natural, it's how we ate before. Yeah. Yes, if we go back to eating exactly that way, where, yes, they're having butter on their potatoes, but they're also having loads of vegetables that's freshly cooked. They're not snacking, all the time, every time they're walking past. They're not getting these lattes that, my kids love from Starbucks that have got about 2,000 calories and goodness knows, their month's worth of sugar. Yeah, but, true. So there's, I think we need to kind of step back a little bit, and it's very easy to romanticize this whole kind of keto.
Yeah, I think it's really, so I think that people who are on keto, they are sticking to it, right? I do think that. I do think people who are on a keto diet are saying, I'm sticking to it. I think what you're alluding to is how sustainable is that?
For some people, keto might work for them if they're doing it to lose weight. Right. I think that there's some great research out there looking at low carb diets, which are basically the principle of keto diets, versus high carb diets. And you see that there's a huge variability in the effectiveness of this. There's this great study carried out by a professor in Stanford that we work with that was called Diet Fits. And what they found is that when they put people on a high carb diet or a low carb diet, that some people did really well in losing weight on the high carb diet, some people did really well losing weight on the low carb diet, but equally some people put on weight on this. So there's a real individuality to how we respond to food. And this is what we see with our own Zoe research. Yeah. There's huge individuality. So I think we need to remember, just because it might work for your friend does not mean it's going to work for you. But also within, when we're talking about keto diets, or we're talking about high carb diets or low carb diets or dairy-free diets, or, all of these different things, it's a huge area. So a keto diet could be something that you could do reasonably healthy if you're getting your sources of calories from foods like avocados, olive oil. So you're still getting a little bit of fibre in there. You're still getting all of the plant bioactives, but you're having quite a low carb. Then it can be healthy. Or you can have, on the other hand, a keto diet that I would consider, and I think the evidence shows is very unhealthy. That's red meat, processed red meat, butter, etc., that you're not getting fibre, you're not getting plant bioactives, you're getting loads of saturated fat. Now, they could both be called keto if they're below a certain amount of carbohydrate. Right. But you're still talking about two very different diets. And I think that's why we need to kind of move away from thinking about the nutrients to thinking again about the foods. Yes. So it's again this whole, I know that you started this question probably 10 minutes ago about low carb and diets and should we be avoiding carbs, and are all carbs bad? Carbs is a huge food group. Yeah. Plants and all plants have carbs in. Yes. Vegetables are carb sources. They're essential for us. They're so important for our health, our longevity, etc. Or you can have sugar. You can have white rice, white pasta, white bread. No, they're refined carbs. Those kind of refined carbs, or we call them refined starches, no, they're not good for us if consumed in excess, if consumed on their own, without balance. Absolutely. But can carbs be part of a healthy diet? Can we still lose weight if we want to with carbs? Absolutely, if we're having whole grain, if we're having the right types of carbs. So I think just kind of brandishing a food as saying, oh, it's high fat, or oh, it's high carb, or whatever, I think is a wrong way of thinking about things personally.
It's really interesting when you say about, carbs aren't that bad for you. Why have they been so demonized then? Why are people saying don't have carbs? Or cut carbs before marbs? Not that I'm going to Marbs is Marbella, by the way.
So I think that often it's because of the new world of communication we live in.
Okay.
The world of social media, the world of med influencers or social media influencers, of people that aren't scientists, aren't nutritionists. We all have an opinion on food because it's the one thing we all do. We all sleep, we all eat, we all poo, we all wee. So everyone has an opinion on it because it's something we all do. And I think that unfortunately, many of the people that make a lot of noise about food, nutrition and health are people that are not research active scientists. They are not scientists or haven't been trained as scientists to interpret the evidence. A lot of time it's based on anecdotal evidence.
Right.
A lot of the time it's based on cherry picking out particular studies or seeing one study and then not seeing the breadth of evidence. So you could have one study showing X, you could have 25 other clinical trials showing the opposite, but they cherry pick that because that suits their narrative. So I think there's so much miscommunication and misinformation. I don't think it's done in most cases deliberately.
Right.
I'm being generous. I think many of the times it's because that's what those people genuinely believe.
Yeah.
But I think that often it's then translated at such a simplistic level when food is so nuanced.
Yes.
And so there is research showing, yes, refined carbohydrates I don't think are good for us. And I think we should try and reduce them generally. And I think there's enough evidence to support that we need to be eating as much whole grain carbohydrates as possible. There's plenty of evidence around the benefits of whole grain. But I think that what then happens is when the message is communicated, it's just carbs, full stop. And without people saying, actually, it's this particular type of carb you need to worry about, but not those. But then it gets lost. And the reality is, I'm a scientist that will always caveat and always nuance. And that's a bit less interesting than me saying, no carbs before marbs, seed oils are toxic, go suck on that bit of butter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what people would want, those quick things. And it's not as simple as that.
Yeah.
But that's what people are listening to. And unfortunately, as scientists, we need to get better, myself included, at communicating simple messages while still enabling people to understand the nuances. And it's hard because food is so nuanced.
What would you say are some of the carbs to avoid then?
I would try and reduce refined carbs as much as possible.
Okay.
I think that they can still be part of a healthy diet. And those include white rice, white pasta, white bread, sugar. So those kind of refined carbs that we know are very rapidly absorbed into our bloodstream, that give us very little feelings of fullness, so therefore may cause overconsumption of calories, etc.
Okay, and what would we have instead?
So I would always go for functional equivalents. So if you like your bread, I'm not suggesting that you don't have your bread for breakfast. So instead of white bread, go for whole grain bread as much as possible. The higher the fibre in the bread, the better. So going for rye bread or, depending on your preference.
That's a hype. That was a full-on hype.
So sourdough doesn't necessarily contain more fibre depending on the type of sourdough.
Okay.
But with sourdough, it's about the fact that it may be more beneficial for your gut microbiome because of the way it's baked, et cetera, probiotics. I think the jury's still out on that.
Okay.
So my suggestion would be if you want white bread, then yes, maybe going for sourdough instead of standard supermarket bread, if you could go for sourdough, or choose white bread that's got the least extra additives, emulsifiers, et cetera in it. But the best thing is to go for the higher fibre breads.
I didn't know that.
And so the whole grains, the pumpernickel, the rye bread. Now, some people might find that too big a jump. Rye bread's quite flavoursome.
It is.
And it might be that you don't want to, if you like your Marmite on your toast, you want to just taste your Marmite. But you can do a stepwise approach. So go to, quite maybe a 50-50 first, then go to whole grain, then after a few months move up. But the more fibre you can have in your bread, the better. White rice, change for whole grain rice. White pasta, change for whole grain pasta. Or you could even change it for some of these plant-based alternatives. There's...
I have lentil pasta.
Yeah, lentil pastas, chickpea pasta.
I have that in rice now too.
Yeah, and they've got loads of protein in them. They've got loads of fibre. Yeah. They're absorbed more slowly. Yeah. They activate our fullness signals more. So there's lots of alternatives that are out there. Yeah. And there's lots of alternatives now that are more affordable than they were 5 years 100%. Ago as well.
Talking about bread, I've seen a lot of people now saying you should freeze your bread because it changes the microbiome or bacteria or the way the calories are absorbed in your body. Is that true?
It is, actually.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so if I put my bread in the freezer, my whole grain sourdough, I actually buy white sourdough, no points to me there. But if I put it in the freezer and I eat it.
Well, I hope you defrost it first.
Well, yeah, obviously, defrost it. Put it in the toaster straight away though.
Yeah.
Defrost it, add a bit of butter. It's better for me than if I just buy it from the supermarket and put it straight in the toaster.
Yes.
In what way?
So with your refined grains, so with your bread, and the same applies to pasta and rice.
No way.
What happens is that the cooling process, so once you've heated it, and so bread obviously is baked, so it's been heated, but obviously when you cook rice and pasta, then you heat it in the pan at home. When you cool it down, you get the formation of something called resistant starch. And essentially, in really simplistic terms, it's kind of like changing the refined starch, so the refined carbohydrate, in very simple terms, into a kind of fibre.
Okay.
And resistant starch is called resistant starch because it's resistant to digestion. So you get some conversion of this refined carbohydrate so very accessible and rapidly absorbed carbohydrate into this resistant starch. So what that means is some of it's not absorbed, it slows down the rate as well as absorption. Some of it reaches your large intestine, so your colon, which is where your gut microbiome or a large part of it resides. So then they have stuff to feast on as well. And so now there's lots of evidence emerging around the health effects of resistant starch and how beneficial it is, probably partly because of the microbiome, maybe also because of other mechanisms, how it affects our metabolism.
Wow.
And so whilst we don't know fully quite how big the effect is, and there's studies that have been done in Surrey University actually looking at this, we do know that the heating, the cooling, and then the reheating creates that resistant starch. So there's so many tools in our toolbox that we can use to slightly modify the healthfulness of that food. Now, is that better than actually just having whole grain? Probably not. But you can do what you've said, which is freeze the whole grain.
Yeah.
So then what starch there is on top of the fibre, you're getting even more benefits.
And actually, you could lose weight by eating that way, couldn't you?
Potentially, depending on what else is going on in your diet.
But let's say you were just going to the supermarket, buying bread, putting it in the toaster, and you made a tiny switch about putting your bread in the freezer, and you had the exact same diet. Could you lose weight?
It depends. It depends on how much of that bread you're eating. So look, if it's only
the same amount, as before.
I mean, if you're only having 2 slices a day, will it actually make a notable difference?
Oh, I see. In terms of the freezing process.
Well, in terms of how much of an impact it has on our microbiome, yes, it will have an impact, we believe. How much of a difference it has in the calories that we absorb, probably minor. So yes, it might over time, but I would see it more as it generally improves the overall healthfulness. Yeah. So I think there's 2 different things. There's weight and then there's the healthfulness. So I'd say do it to improve the healthfulness of that food.
Yes.
I mean, it's not going to transform a crappy white bread into this wonder food. But it just reduces some of the potential downsides of it.
It's interesting that you say that just because something is natural doesn't mean it's necessarily healthy.
Yep.
And just because something is healthy doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make you lose weight. Mm-hmm. I think that nuance is really, really important. I really want to talk about raw milk. This is another health trend I'm seeing.
Yep.
Why are we drinking milk from the supermarket with all of these additives and all of these extra things in it when we can go to a farmer's market and buy raw milk straight from a cow or a goat, whatever animal you choose to?
So I don't know much about raw milk. What I do know is that the reason milk goes through processes like pasteurization is to make it safe for us to drink. So from what little I do understand, there are harms of having raw milk. And we know that this does cause ill health to people. Not everyone, but a certain proportion of people. It might be low, but still there is a risk of raw milk. And so I think we need to be careful because of that. Pasteurization is a really important technique to make that milk safer. Doesn't mean it's got lots of additives and all other stuff. Yes, there is a problem that maybe many of the cows are given lots of, different hormones, etc., in their feed. That's a whole different matter. But most milk you'll find in supermarkets in general is just a milk that's undergone pasteurization.
I think it's really interesting also talking about that because we're seeing a rise of these wellness trends right now, right? And people love to follow people along during the process that they're going through it. But we don't know what's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years. So I don't know if you ever watched that series, Apple Cider Vinegar. Did you watch it?
No.
Oh my God, you have to watch it. It's amazing. It's a series on Netflix. It was talking about this girl who got diagnosed with cancer. And she said, I want to go down the holistic route, right? And she just wanted to drink juices and do all this stuff. Now, at the time, it seemed as if the treatment was working. She felt better. She was really energetic. Her rashes went down. They weren't doing any testing because they were going by how she was feeling, because the more testing she did, the worse it was for her, la-di-da. What I'm trying to say is that she 100% believed in that moment, and this is based on a true story, that her using this holistic diet, switching to veganism, and doing this wellness trend was helping get rid of her cancer. And she believed it full-heartedly. There was someone else who was impersonating her, but we won't get to that. Now, I think a lot of these wellness influencers who are out there, they do believe that these things are helping them. Their skin's clearing up, they're losing weight, they're sleeping better, they feel more energetic, they look better, all of these different things. But we don't know what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years' time, which is so worrying because we're asking other people to jump on this bandwagon with us. And I just want to also give credit to some influencers. I also think that people get a lot of stick for sharing what they're doing. When someone's sharing what they're doing, they're not necessarily saying that you have to do it. Yeah. They're just saying that this is what I do, because most of the time people are saying, oh, tell me your diet, tell me what you eat in the morning, tell me about your bulletproof coffee. People are asking, so they're sharing their products. And so whilst I don't think that they're doing it to harm other people, I also think that the overload of information and how accessible we have information to everyone's lives and what they're doing is really, really something that is quite harmful. For example, and I want to go back to the milk saga, and I promise you we will go on to rapeseed oil as our last point. We'll start and close with it. A couple of weeks ago, I was very bloated to the point where I honestly looked about 3 or 4 months pregnant. I'll show you the photo after. And I realized that there must be something in my diet that is wrong, right? Because I have got this a couple of times. I had it when I was traveling, I had it in India, and it's very, very painful. It looks as if I put on a lot of weight, and I know it's not weight, but it feels uncomfortable. And I put it on my story. And I said, I'm really bloating, give me some of your tips. Now, so many people responded and gave me really helpful tips. My mum had some holistic tips. My grandma gave me some holistic tips. I went for lymphatic drainage, which massively helped. People gave me loads of powders and supplements and juices and told me to drink apple cider vinegar in the morning. Now, I haven't started apple cider vinegar, but I have been taking an apple cider vinegar gummy after I've eaten, and it has helped. But I have been doing a multitude of things. One of them is drinking 2 liters of water a day, because I used to drink maybe 500 mils of water a day. I'm cutting out fizzy drinks because I used to drink loads of fizzy drinks. I'm having fenugreek seeds before I go to bed. There's loads of things that I'm doing. The problem I have with this whole bloating saga that I went through was, instead of me getting to the root cause of the problem, which, by the way, I have gone for a genetics test now, so I will hopefully get to the root cause, I was flooded with so many solutions of things to take, supplements to have, drinks to have, and it was said, this is going to solve your bloating. Now, these companies are marketing to women to cure their bloating, their PMS, their mood swings. These companies are targeting things like bloating, PMS, menopause, whatever they are, fatigue. And it's very easy to buy into all of these things. In my situation, if I came to you and said, I'm really bloated, would you recommend me all of these supplements and drinks and things to take? Or would you give me another solution? What would you tell me to do?
So the first thing I'd tell you to do is to actually speak to a dietitian. So I'm a nutrition scientist,
okay,
and a dietitian is properly qualified to be able to get to the root cause of something that might be due to your diet.
Okay.
And I think this is a really important message, actually, because anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. The nutrition title is not under any kind of governance. So you could say, having spoken to me, a few other nutritionists, I'm a nutritionist.
Really?
Now, there is a registration, an association for nutrition. So after my title, as well as the fact I'm professor, doctor, et cetera, PhD, master's, I do have something called AFN, which means I'm a member of the Association for Nutrition.
Right.
But anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. Dietitians, however, have to go through very rigorous training. And I think it's really important that people understand that. So when you hear a dietitian talking on social media, they have undergone a pre-approved course. It's clinically approved. They are qualified to work in clinical settings in hospitals. They are the people that are qualified in a way to be able to communicate to you evidence-based science, but also to be able to try and work out what's going on and how to give you the best advice. And they should, because this is their training, and they have to adhere as part of their membership with the BDA, the British Dietetics Association. They have to adhere to certain professional boundaries, etc. They will make sure the advice they're giving you is based on sound evidence. You could go and see anyone who says they're a nutritionist, and goodness knows what advice they will give you. So that is my first recommendation, that you would see a dietitian and not necessarily a nutritionist. Now, I'm not saying all nutritionists are bad. There are some incredible evidence-based nutritionists out there. But what I'm saying is be really, really careful, because they are not qualified typically in the same way, but some will be as good as. The second thing I would say is, whoa, throwing all of these 100 things at it, how can you possibly work out what it is? And what you've got to remember is when you add something in, typically you take something out. Right. Now, it's different if it's a supplement. So if it's a supplement, then typically you're just adding that in. Yes. And so, yes, you could try one thing at a time. But I think the first thing I would say is, okay, let's look at your diet now. Keep a diet diary.
What I did.
Let's see, is there something specifically that's triggering it? You know, does it flare up? Does it flare down? Is it there all the time? Can we see a pattern with what you're eating versus kind of when it's flaring up? And then what we would try and do is see, before adding in, quite often the approach that we would take is, and again, I'm not a practicing dietitian, but the approach generally would be like, okay, we're seeing that there's a link between these particular foods and these flare-ups. Why don't we try and take these out of our diet in order to see if that's causing it?
Right.
But we have to be mindful always, as we take something out or as we add something in, it's always the instead of what. So you need to be a bit mindful. But then we could also look at, okay, there doesn't seem to be a single trigger in your diet. Let's see if supplements might help. Let's see where there's evidence. And then this is where I would say that you as an individual need to take some kind of agency over this decision making, because what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person.
So true.
And I think this is something we're only really starting to understand the depths of in nutrition research, in the advice that we give. Yes, there's some things that work for everyone. Everyone should increase their fibre, but slowly, to improve their overall health. Yes, we all need to have, a decent amount of vitamin D, of calcium, of, micronutrients, whatever. But there's other things where supplements can work quite differently for other people. And if I could use an example, for example, of a supplement in menopause, which I think is a really pertinent example of how we need to be cautious, firstly, about what I call menowashing. So menopause is a point in time in women's life. We're all going to go through it, or most of us will, where suddenly around the ages of 45, 50, many of us are hit with quite burdensome symptoms. And we see from our own research, 80% of women in that perimenopausal phase around their 50s, 80% have poor sleep, have anxiety, have mood changes, etc., and feel pretty crap. So it's a point in time where women are very desperate. So you go into the supermarkets, you go into health food stores, and you see all of these supplements, Meno this, Meno whatever. Yes. And it's called like menowashing. And the same applies for everything, whether it's to do with your bloating, whether it's to do with your skin. Yeah. We call that menowashing. You stick Meno in front of it, you can charge 20 times as much, because women are desperate. And essentially, a lot of the time, they're just getting a supplement that's similar to another supplement. You could do the same for someone in your situation. You are having bothersome bloating. If you saw a thing that said an anti-bloat versus 100%. Just a bog standard, that would be like, whoa, I'm going to spend that extra money. So firstly, there's that it kind of preys on people's desperation, their vulnerability. But then there is that variability. So if we take menopause, and we think about some of these symptoms like hot flushes, for example, we know that there's certain chemicals called phytoestrogens. These are found in soy products, and these are chemicals that basically bind to our estrogen receptors. So they mimic, in simple terms, estrogen in the body. What happens when you go through the menopause, your estrogen drops, which is why you get all of these terrible symptoms. So if you're consuming these soy isoflavones that they're called, then they're acting like an estrogen. They bind to the estrogen receptors and they can reduce your symptoms. The problem is it's really variable. So on average, they reduce women's symptoms a little bit. But what we now know is that for some people, and it's actually dependent on the composition of their microbiome, for some people, they can convert these phytoestrogens into really active forms that bind really, really tightly. And so they have a big reduction in symptoms. Other people don't have the bacteria that make them into this really active form. So they don't bind very strongly, in simple terms. And so then what happens is you don't have the same reduction. So people that are able to convert these isoflavones, these phytoestrogens, into the really tightly binding forms have a 75% greater reduction in symptoms compared to those who don't have those species that can't convert it. So I could say to you, I mean, you're a lot younger than me, but let's pretend you're 48, which I am. You know, I'm in the depths of menopause, brain fog, mood swings, etc. And I could say, oh my gosh, I've just taken this phytoestrogen soy isoflavone supplement. Oh my God, it's cured my symptoms. I feel great. Now that could be because I've got the microbiome species that enable, in this instance, but you could then go and try it and be like, it's not doing it for me. So this is why we need to be a little bit careful about, yes, what does the overall evidence say? But again, a dietitian, someone properly qualified would say, okay, you could try this. Yes. On average, it reduces symptoms, but you might not have a bigger symptom reduction as this influencer that you've just seen on TikTok that said that it's transformed her life and she's the most happy person in the entire world now.
It's so true because, you know, someone told me to take apple cider vinegar. Someone else told me to take L-glutamine. And it was more when people, exactly, I'd never heard of it. It's more when people are constantly, and then someone sent me this supplement and I you know, it's really sweet because people are being so helpful. Yeah. I honestly had about 60 different recommendations of things that I should do. And what really intrigued me is, you know, I would be spending so much time implementing all these new things, researching these new things, rather than just stripping it back. So what I did is I just said, okay, I'm going to cut out processed foods for the next couple of days. Yep. I was having a lot of dairy because I love Indian tea and Indian tea has loads of dairy and I wasn't really having that before. But my mum got me a little pot and so I started making loads of it. So let me cut that out for a couple of days and see. I started chewing my food and eating it slowly because I eat so quickly. So I'm always like inhaling, on the go, walking, running, swallowing loads of air. I just started, honestly, to be a bit more mindful and I started to keep a diary of all the food that I was eating. Now, when you are keeping a diary of all the food you're eating, you know, I did it for about 5 days. I stopped now. It's very difficult. But when you are doing it, you know, you are really mindful of all the things that you are eating. That's why, you know, I was saying, oh my God, I can't believe I've eaten so much sugar. I didn't know I was eating this much sugar. And then I also didn't know I was eating so much fiber. So, you know, 50 grams is quite a lot for 3 days in a row. I was like, okay, so maybe that's contributing to the bloating also. So I also think that doing your own research instead of just looking for a quick fix online is really important. But I think that because we're so busy and because we are seeing people saying, this changed my life, this changed my skin, this changed this, you are attracted to it, obviously.
We want a quick fix.
Of course we
Everyone
do.
Does.
Everyone's busy. Everyone's tired. Everyone wants to also try the new wellness biohacking tool that someone's selling them. You know, we want to hear about it. So I think it gets tricky with that. I want to go back to your favorite topic of the world, seed oils. So tell me why you think seed oils are good for us. And, you know, in this example, I want to catch you out a little bit. You said to use olive oil sometimes. You never told me to use rapeseed oil or sunflower oil. And if we think about when we're frying things, or when we think about when people tell us to use oils on our salads or to cook our eggs or, you know, to cook our veg, I never hear anyone saying use sunflower oil because it's so good for you. It's always extra virgin dark olive oil.
Okay.
You have the floor.
Fantastic. Let's break it down. So I think there's a lot of kind of romanticization again around extra virgin olive oil. Oh, Mediterranean diet.
Yes.
These blue zones, they live so long. It's because of the extra virgin olive oil. And you think of this very kind of holistic, wonderful lifestyle, healthy person. Rapeseed oil, I think different perceptions come up.
Yeah.
Like, so if I was to say rapeseed oil, what would you think?
It's in all the added processed foods.
Exactly.
That's how I think
I
of
don't
it,
think you would think of the same image in your head. So
No.
anyone listening to this, I think I'd say, okay, think of extra virgin olive oil, close your eyes, what do you see?
Lovely on
Think
a
of
salad, healthy, light.
Think of rapeseed oil, what do you see?
Dark.
And so I think there's a place for both in your diet. I think the extra virgin olive oil has very much been considered kind of the king of oils for a number of reasons. Firstly, the fat composition is really healthy in olive oil. So it's got a very large amount of monounsaturated fats. And monounsaturated fats are very stable, which means they don't oxidize very easily, but they're good for our heart health. They do have some saturated fat in extra virgin olive oil, but it's quite small. Now, extra virgin olive oil also is packed with these bioactives called polyphenols. And polyphenols, like we mentioned earlier, which are also in dark chocolate, polyphenols are so good for our health. They're so good for our heart health, our brain health, our, all aspects of our health. They have powerful activities in terms of inflammatory pathways and so much more. They impact favorably our gut microbiome. So they have these wide-reaching health effects. So you've got something like extra virgin olive oil that's packed full of these polyphenol bioactives, healthy chemicals, and full of healthy fats within it. Now, that's extra virgin olive oil. You can refine the extra virgin olive oil, so undergo refinement processes to then produce olive oil. That olive oil will contain the same type of fat, so it will still have really healthy fats, so your monounsaturated fat, but it will have very, very little of the polyphenols. So that's why if you're going for olive oil, it's worth, if you can afford it, to spend that extra money and go for the extra virgin olive oil.
Got it.
Now, the polyphenols do also carry a fragrance, a flavour. So that's why, yes, it's great for dipping your bread in, it's great for drizzling on salad, but because of that strong flavour, many people might not necessarily want to cook with it. I don't want to personally fry my egg in extra virgin olive oil because I want to taste the egg, not the olive oil.
Yeah.
I don't want to have an extra virgin olive oil cake. There's some health food stores that make cakes made with extra virgin olive oil. That's me personally because I don't want that strong flavour. Other people might like it. So then you've got oils that have a more neutral flavour and also have different health benefits. So you've got your seed oils, and the most relevant one to us in the UK is rapeseed oil. That's the most commonly consumed oil. To a lesser extent, we have sunflower seed oil. Now, rapeseed oil has a broadly similar composition to olive oil, but it has even less saturated fat, and it also has some polyunsaturated fat. And it has polyunsaturated fat that we know is really good for lowering our cholesterol. It has two types of polyunsaturated fat, one called the omega-3 and one called the omega-6.
Yeah.
But they both lower our cholesterol, as does the monounsaturated fat, depending on what you're replacing it with. But so you have something like rapeseed oil that is even better than olive oil in terms of lowering your cholesterol. So it's really beneficial for keeping your cholesterol levels healthy. About 55% of us over the age of 40 have elevated cholesterol. Now, what rapeseed oil doesn't have, particularly if it's heavily refined, it doesn't have the same polyphenol content that olive oil has.
Right.
So you've got two oils that are heart healthy because of the fat composition, the mono and polyunsaturated fat, with rapeseed oil being even better in terms of cholesterol. Then you've got your extra virgin, so your unrefined olive oil that's also packed with polyphenols. And then with your rapeseed oil, if it's cold pressed, so it's kind of like an extra virgin rapeseed oil, yes, it has some polyphenols, but nowhere near the same amount as olive oil. Okay. If it's refined, it still has all those fantastic heart healthy fats, but it doesn't have hardly any of the polyphenols. And so I think they both have a place. Now, refined rapeseed oil, as well as having these great healthy fats in them, doesn't have much of a taste. So if I was to go and fry you an egg, one in extra virgin olive oil, one in rapeseed oil, you would taste the egg rather than the oil typically if it was fried in rapeseed oil, because it doesn't carry that strong fragrance, that strong flavour. So they have their different uses. They're both really healthy for you. And I would always suggest having a mixture depending on the use that you want to use it for. Rapeseed oil is also quite stable for frying, because whilst it does have some polyunsaturated fat, it doesn't have as much as sunflower oil. Sunflower oil tends to be very high in polyunsaturated fat, which is a bit more easily oxidized. So if I was to suggest to you, because I'm sure you're probably about to ask me this.
Put the gun to your head, yeah.
I would absolutely say that extra virgin olive oil is a fantastic, healthy part of your diet. If you like the taste of fragrance, yes, use it liberally. We know that having plenty of oil in your diet is really great for you, bring down your cholesterol. But there's also a fantastic place for rapeseed oil as well. So I'd also use rapeseed oil, particularly if you want that neutral taste. If you're suffering from high cholesterol, I'd also include rapeseed oil, because we know it can help bring your cholesterol down.
So you wouldn't say that olive oil is better for you than rapeseed oil?
That's a really difficult question, because I think it depends on you as an individual. So
really? Why?
So if someone came to me and said they really need to reduce their cholesterol, I would say, well, the best fat to use then is rapeseed oil. But olive oil will still be of benefit. If someone was thinking more holistically about their overall health, given that extra virgin olive oil has all of these polyphenols, I would suggest that they use extra virgin olive oil. And that's why I'm hedging my bets here a little bit. I would say have both. But I tell you what, if you are putting that gun to my head, I would probably say overall extra virgin olive oil.
I just love that this whole podcast has been, if you're going to put a gun to my head, I should maybe rebrand to that. What?
That can be the title of our podcast.
I put a gun to your head. Sure, that'll get a lot of clicks, wouldn't it?
So the seed oil haters will love that.
Yeah. But why do people hate seed oil so much? I mean, it can't have come from nowhere.
So there's a number of reasons that are advocated as to why seed oils are so toxic. They're going to kill us. They're going to give us every disease under the sun.
Yeah.
You name something bad, seed oils are causing it. I'm saying that for anyone listening in jest. I hope you'll realise that in a few minutes. So
I'm going to clip that as a headline. Dr. Sarah Perry changed her opinion.
That will get lots of clicks. You know, I was actually, after going on quite a high-profile podcast talking about the benefits of seed oil, I got quite a lot of hate mail. And one of them said, "How does it feel to be the most hated scientist in America right now?"
Oh, no.
Yes, there is a gun to my head about seed oils. So there's a few arguments that are used. The first is very simply, butter is natural, seed oils are unnatural. They go through all of this awful process of, the refinement and all of these scary words like deodorization and bleaching, etc. And so therefore it's bad for you. Well, it does go through a processing technique. Assuming it's going through a good processing, which I think nearly all of the foods that we have in the UK, they're processed by these big manufacturers that use very, very robust techniques.
Okay.
That there's none of these harmful, nothing kind of harmful left in the fat. I think it's a very healthy oil. Yes, maybe cold press might be better, but there's no human studies comparing cold press versus refined. So cold press means that you've literally just squeezed the oil out. So I think, firstly, there's no evidence to show just because it's refined that it's bad for you. There's no evidence to support that. There is some evidence to show that, yes, if it's refined, there's slightly less polyphenols, there's slightly less vitamin E. Doesn't mean it's bad for you. It's still got all of these fantastic, healthy oils in. The other argument they use is, whoa, hold on. If you look over the last 50 years, our intake of seed oils has increased 100-fold. So has our levels of heart disease, cancer.
Yes.
Type 2 diabetes, obesity. You can do this lovely plot, shows the rate of intake of seed oils and all of these terrible diseases. Of course it's due to that. Well, okay. Firstly, 60% of the seed oils are in these terrible foods. Nothing to do with seed oils. They're in these ultra-processed foods containing all of this other crap. Secondly, we're sitting on our bums a lot more.
Yes.
Thirdly, what else is changing in our environment? Drinking, smoking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just because correlation, as we call it in science, doesn't mean causation. Just because there's a correlation between the intake of seed oils and these diseases doesn't mean that's a causative factor. So that's the second thing, that they are using incorrect evidence around that. Then the third thing is around a theoretical biochemical pathway. And I'm going to try and not go into too much detail on this, because it is something I've spent many years studying, and I do teach. I spend about 2 hours giving this lecture on this pathway. But many of these seed oil haters put out these posts talking about this biochemical pathway, and it all sounds so clever and so plausible, because there's certain polyunsaturated fats in seed oils, the omega-6 ones, that increases particular markers related to inflammation, or measures related to inflammation. And there is this pathway whereby, yes, upon certain stimulation, these fats can cause an increase in certain chemicals related to inflammation. Absolutely. But that isn't what happens in our body in reality. In reality, there is no evidence to show that eating seed oils or increasing this particular type of this polyunsaturated fat, this omega-6, increases inflammation. It doesn't increase this kind of endpoint fat. It's called arachidonic acid. It doesn't increase the amount of that, which is what then goes on to increase these inflammatory mediators. So there just isn't the evidence to support what is a beautiful theoretical pathway. Yeah. And it's a correct biochemical pathway. It doesn't play out in humans. Our bodies are so clever. Our bodies are so clever in enabling us, to have the right amount of inflammation. Inflammation is essential. If we cut ourselves, it's only because we have an inflammatory response that we actually heal ourselves. Yeah. It's if it's in the wrong place at the wrong time and in excess that it's a problem. And so actually it plays an important role rather than a negative role. Yeah. So that's the third thing, is that misinterpretation of what might be seen from a biochemical pathway versus what plays out. And then there's misinterpretation of the evidence as well. Yes. Which I'm not going to bore you with that. We have done a whole Zoe podcast on seed oils. I've talked about it for whole hours. Anyone who wants to know about that, I talk about the different studies and how actually they talk about particular studies, these seed oil haters, and it's totally misinterpreted. And so I break down some of those myths. And so I think that there's plausibility to each of those arguments. Yeah. But they're totally flawed, but they sound so convincing. They do. And everyone wants to hate something. If you put on social media a scary headline, that's going to get you loads of clicks. Yeah. And yet, Dr. Sarah Berry sitting here saying seed oils are perfectly safe as part of a healthy, balanced diet.
Yeah, it's true.
Who wants to click on that?
It is true. I mean, it's really interesting because we are seeing these extreme narratives and extreme diets. And I think that's why so many people are scaremongered, and that's why so many people are so confused. I want to go through a few wellness things. As a nutritionist and as a scientist, I want you to tell me if you would take these or you'd pass.
Yep.
Okay. I shower.
Me personally pass, but I know it works for some people.
Beef tallow.
Oh, big pass on that.
Well, I'm vegetarian, so I'm happy to hear that. But why, quickly?
Beef tallow, it's basically almost like butter. It's packed with saturated fat. And I mean, it's getting this resurgence in the US where you've got people like RFK, the equivalent of like the health minister out there, Department of Health, saying, eat beef tallow, ban seed oils. No.
Okay, mouth tape.
No idea.
Collagen patches.
Not enough evidence. But if it works for you, great.
Protein bars.
No to most of them.
Protein shakes.
No. We get enough protein in our diet generally in the UK. Most people get enough.
How much is enough?
So for the average person, I would say having 1 gram per kilogram. So if you're a 60 kilogram female, having 60 grams a day, I would say that it's quite good to break it up throughout the day. I would say the key thing with protein is making sure you're getting a diversity of protein if you are vegetarian or vegan. So making sure you're getting protein from different sources like nuts, seeds, pulses, whole grains. So you get a complete protein. And I think adding protein into your high carb meals is fantastic for balancing out your blood glucose. So if you were to have toast and then add some yogurt on the side or peanut butter, which has got protein in, then you're going to have a smoother blood glucose response. You'll feel fuller for longer. You'll have more, studies even show you might feel more alert. You might have more energy.
Okay.
But you don't need to do it through a protein shake, in my opinion. You can get, if you're worried about calories and want just protein, you can get a low-fat Greek yogurt that's really low calorie and it's packed full of protein, and healthy protein. And then there's vegan sources as well that you can get of protein.
Sticks of butter, I know you're going to say no to that.
Nope.
Raw milk?
Nope.
Ozempic?
I think it has its place for people who are struggling with their weight. Mm-hmm. And by this, I mean people who are quite overweight.
Yes.
Who are obese, who are struggling to bring their weight to a healthy weight. And weight loss, weight gain, weight maintenance is so multifactorial, it's so complex, and it's so difficult to lose weight. Our bodies are so clever at maintaining a set point. So if you have become overweight, trying to reduce your weight is so hard, because as you reduce your calorie intakes, your appetite signals go up, telling you to eat more, your metabolic rate changes. We have evolved to maintain the weight that we're in, i.e. not to reduce our weight. Wow. If you think about how we evolved thousands of years ago, it was to be able to handle periods of famine. And we have not evolved as quickly as our food environment has evolved. So physiologically, we haven't evolved as quickly as the food environment. We're in a food environment that encourages overconsumption of calories.
Yes.
And in that food environment, if you are obese, then I think there is a place for the GLP agonists, the Ozempic, the Wegovy. But I think that what's so important is if you are going on that journey, you have to make sure, because your appetite is suppressed and because you're eating less, that what you're eating is the highest quality, that you're getting enough fiber, you're getting enough diversity, you're getting the nutrients that you need. It's so important to do that. What I would say is that there's lots of people that I think are carrying maybe only a slightly bit of extra weight.
Yes.
And they're using it as an easy fix. And personally, and I can say this, I know easily because I'm slim, I think that we should be quite cautious about that, because we don't really know what the long-term effects of someone, that probably isn't really that much of an unhealthy weight.
Oh, we don't know the long-term effects of Ozempic if you're skinny already and you're trying to just be like supersized 0.
I mean, there's lots of, obviously it's gone through lots and lots of clinical trials, but I would just be a little bit cautious taking a drug if you really don't need it.
Yeah.
And I think for people who are obese, the health effects of being obese, living with obesity, are big.
Yeah.
In terms of increasing risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancers, etc. And so that it's worth taking the drug because of that, if you're also thinking of your bigger diet. But I think that if you're a moderately okay weight, I would be a bit cautious.
Okay.
That was a long answer.
It's okay. And my last one is ultra-processed foods.
Gosh, have I got to do this in one sentence? So I think with food processing, we need to think about the overall healthfulness of the food and not just whether it's processed and therefore it's bad. So we need to think about, is the food in its kind of original structure?
Right.
Does the food look like the real food it's come from? Does it have loads and loads of additives? Bearing in mind some additives aren't bad for us. And does it have no fibre? Does it have excessive salt? Does it have excessive sugar? I think that we need to be careful blanket demonising all ultra-processed food. Some food processing is good for us, some is neutral for us, some absolutely is bad for us. And it's really difficult, I think, understanding as a consumer. I even find as a nutrition scientist difficult in the supermarket working out, well, is this cereal better for me than this cereal? It's really hard. And this is something we're doing a lot of research on at Zoe. And so very soon we will hopefully have a solution to that.
It's a really difficult one. And I hope that for people who have been listening to this, they've picked up on small things that they can do to, balance our lifestyle on the go, have something to eat, without worrying about the labels too much, understand the difference when the way food is given to us. Like you said, with oats, I also have heard you talk about nuts on another podcast. So whilst I think there are a lot of myths out there I really hope you've helped to change people's mind, and especially on rapeseed oils and seed oils in general.
Well, I hope so. And I think a really important message to finish on is that there's so many tools in our toolbox. And I think that, yes, we need to get the fundamentals of our diet right. And the fundamentals are really simple.
Yeah.
Increase your fibre intake, increase your plant diversity, try and minimise the unhealthy processed foods. But what I would say to people as well, there's lots of tools in your toolbox around how you eat your food. And so slow down how fast you eat your food. We know from research that if you can just reduce how quickly you eat your food by 20%, you, without even thinking about it, subconsciously reduce how many calories you consume by 15%.
Crazy.
If you can avoid late night snacking, that's better for your metabolic health. It's better for your hunger levels. The next day you feel less hungry. If you can try and eat in a slightly smaller window, instead of eating over a 14-hour period, try and eat in a 10 or 12-hour window. So there's some simple things around that how. So eating in a smallish window, you don't need to be really restrictive. 10 or 12 hours is fine. Avoiding snacking after 9 o'clock and slowing down how quickly you eat your food. All of those are really small, simple things that we can do that we also know will improve our health.
Yeah, agree. And I think the slowing down eating is something that really helped me, and just being more intentional. And I did a podcast one who told me that, you get the saliva in your mouth, that helps break it down. So I think we've got to go back to being mindful. And I think so often we're so focused on the next new hack and the hack and the next new best thing that we can do. We're so overwhelmed, and then we're just, eating quickly or eating on the go or so stressed out. And that actually really affects, our food and our gut. So I think there's a whole new podcast on this. I mean, I had so many other questions to ask you. But thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I'll get you back on soon.
That was really fun. Just don't hold a gun to my head next time.
I love that, the theme of the podcast, with a gun to your head. Excellent.